What movement technologies innovated the first-person shooter genre in the 2010s, and why were they successful or unsuccessful? Movement mechanics like wall running, a higher base movement speed, double jumps, dashes, and other movement abilities, as well as weapons that affected movement, were very prevalent in AAA first-person shooters of the 2010 and onwards. But what can be learned about what worked and what didn't? The games we'll be talking about today are both Titanfall 1 and 2, Halo 5, Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, and Doom Eternal. Starting with wall running, first seen in 2014's Titanfall, wall running innovated first-person shooters by adding smoother transitions between areas in the arena, adding another level of depth into the options players had while in combat, and allowing players greater control of where they can traverse and how throughout a map. In both Titanfall games, there is a clear emphasis through map design to signify wall running and gives players more ways to get around. In the second Titanfall, wall running can also be combined with other movement options that will be mentioned later, such as slide hopping. Compare this with 2016's Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. The map design is not as integrated with the mechanics of wall running, along with the feel and aesthetics of wall running feeling awkward due to the weapon crosshair being forced to move without player input and the transition animation being a lot smoother in Titanfall. Titanfall's player perception is much better in this manner compared to Infinite Warfare. Second is an overall higher movement speed. Higher movement speed innovated by allowing combat situations to be much more fast-paced, give players more control over their position, and allow for bigger spaces for more enemies to fit inside of an area. Games like Halo 5, Doom Eternal, and again Titanfall capitalized on this by allowing large maps to accommodate, as well as a fast combat loop to go alongside the movement in order to keep up with the capabilities of players. One example is Titanfall keeps the large maps feeling alive by allowing AI to roam around the map and fight each other for players to kill. This prevents players from aimlessly wandering around the map looking for players and centralizes where combat could be in a situation. This is especially important in the first Titanfall game because, unlike its counterpart, there are not as many abilities where the player can drastically increase speed faster than the base sprinting movement. Doom used this in a similar manner by populating large arenas with a few enemies at a time, spawning more in after a short time, and allowing the player space to move around the enemies and strategize how they are going to fight them, and visually see things like how many there were and if there are any major demons to prioritize over others. Next, dashes, double jumps, and other movement abilities. The dashes, double jumps, and other movement abilities, such as ground pounds, give the player more options and how they can approach a combat situation. Combined with other movement tech, this allows for more elevation and randomness to how a given situation will play out. When executed well, this can greatly increase replay value and player perception. Halo 5 has a dash, a ground pound, and a slide ability. These complement each other somewhat and can be combined to enhance movement even further. Often skilled players of Halo 5 will combine sprint with a slide and a dash to get across an arena much faster than if they simply sprinted in the hopes of possibly claiming a power weapon, for example. Another notable example of this is slide hopping done in Titanfall 2. This technique takes some skill and practice and can be used to vastly increase how far and fast players move across an arena, and when combined with abilities like grapple or stim, it can be a massive advantage but sometimes be uncontrollable for a player that does not have the skill and how to keep their momentum going and change direction when attempting this. Compare these with more recent Doom Eternal. Doom has two dash abilities, a ground pound in certain missions, as well as double jumps. These abilities, while not as abundant, suit much better with the gameplay loop of Doom compared to Halo 5, where the ground pound is not used very often due to its very limited capability and time to activate, as well as it never being in a previous Halo title. Lastly, weapons and movement. Weapons have also innovated movement in ways such as increased speed in the air from a recoil, giving players higher than average jumps, and even limiting a player's movement due to AoE damage from specific weapons. In Halo 5, the gravity hammer can be used to increase jump height at the cost of a swing or two. In Doom Eternal, the ballista's recoil can launch a player while midair to increase speed, as well as the Super Shotgun's meat hook ability allowing players to dynamically grapple off of an enemy. And in Titanfall, weapons with an area of effect much like the EPG incentivize players to be more cautious about how they move around the map, with a slow projectile and large explosion that can damage the wielder. All of these abilities completely change how the player could perceive a combat situation, and higher skilled players are able to use these techniques and weapons to much better degree for purposes of things like speedrunning or precision jumps. These are some of the movement technologies that innovated first-person shooters in the 2010s and what made them successful and unsuccessful. Thank you for watching.